Grace Sullivan, 28, a third-year law student at Georgetown, walked through the service entrance of the Meridian Grand Hotel. A pressed uniform in a garment bag over her shoulder and a constitutional law textbook in her backpack. Her eyes scanned the grand ballroom, glittering with crystal chandeliers and silk banners. Tonight was the 12th annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala, a gathering of Washington's most powerful donors. Every table cost $25,000, and the room pulsed with ambition and hidden deals. Grace, carrying her tray of champagne, moved with the quiet confidence she had perfected over 2 years of catering at prestigious events. She wore only one piece of jewelry, a delicate gold bracelet that had belonged to her mother, worn every day until her passing. In the kitchen, Chef Raymond Brooks, known as Rye, noticed her tying her apron. He had watched her grow up, turn grief into determination, and he smiled. "You look just like your mama tonight," he said. Grace returned a small smile, a smile that hid both grief and resolve. She walked into the ballroom, blending into the crowd of tuxedos and gowns. Captain Vince Dutton, 52, head of the Special Events Division of the Metro Police, scanned the room like a hawk. His eyes locked on Grace, and he made a note to his partner, Officer Trent Calloway. "That one. Keep an eye on her." Grace moved with calm efficiency, serving guests without drawing attention. She was invisible, professional, unnoticed, until Dutton approached her. He demanded her credentials, scrutinized her ID, and threatened her. Grace responded calmly, asserting her constitutional rights. Guests watched, some recording, but nobody intervened. Minutes later, he returned, accusing her of theft. Despite evidence proving her innocence, Dutton placed handcuffs on her wrists, pinching her mother's bracelet. Grace's eyes remained clear, her posture proud. In the hallway, the tension grew. A prominent donor, Diane Prescott, spoke up, finally acknowledging the injustice. Officer Calloway hesitated, then called for assistance. Outside, a black SUV arrived, and Nathaniel Sullivan, the first black commissioner of the D.C. Metropolitan Police and Grace's father, stepped in. Calm, commanding, he confronted Dutton and freed his daughter. The crowd watched, awestruck, as Grace stood tall, back straight, hands free, her bracelet catching the light. She had handled the humiliation with grace and strength. This night would be remembered, not just for the injustice, but for the reckoning, for the father protecting his daughter, and for the daughter showing the world her resilience. 2 hours before the confrontation, Grace moved through the service hallway, fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the concrete floor. She adjusted her uniform and smoothed her apron, mentally preparing for the night. Rye, the head chef, barked orders in the kitchen, but his eyes constantly flicked to Grace, proud of her focus and determination. She had always been disciplined, the kind of person who turned loss into drive. She checked her phone briefly, silencing a call from her father, Nathaniel, intent on proving herself without his help. The ballroom shimmered with wealth and influence as Grace entered, balancing champagne glasses with flawless precision. Politicians and lobbyists mingled, oblivious to the young black woman weaving through them with dignity. Elena Whitfield, the event coordinator, moved frantically, unaware that Grace was the keynote speaker's daughter. Captain Vince Dutton entered the ballroom like a force of authority, eyes scanning the crowd until they fixed on Grace. He tracked her movements, his obsession immediate and irrational. Officer Calloway noticed the tension, uneasy about his superior's focus on Grace. As she served table after table, Dutton followed, scrutinizing every gesture. He approached her, demanding credentials, turning a routine check into an act of intimidation. Grace calmly presented her ID, asserting her rights, her voice steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers. Guests murmured but did nothing. Dutton returned moments later, fabricating an accusation of theft. Grace's hands were searched, personal items examined, her mother's bracelet pinched under the handcuffs. She remained composed, her eyes clear and unwavering, while Dutton fumbled. Diane Prescott, a powerful donor, finally spoke, breaking the silence, acknowledging the unfair treatment. Officer Calloway, shaken, called for backup, understanding the gravity of the moment. Outside, a black SUV arrived, signaling Nathaniel Sullivan's impending entrance. Grace, aware yet unyielding, stood as the system's injustice unfolded around her. The stage was set for the intervention that would change the evening, proving her resilience, dignity, and the strength inherited from both her parents. The invisible woman had been noticed, and the world was about to witness the reckoning. Grace Sullivan moved with unwavering focus, navigating the opulent ballroom with a tray of champagne glasses. The crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light over gowns and tuxedos, but she remained invisible, performing her task with precision. Every guest she passed seemed oblivious to her presence, yet she was acutely aware of each face, each detail, as though cataloguing the hierarchy of power around her. Captain Vince Dutton lingered nearby, his gaze fixed, obsessive, as he prepared to confront her. Officer Calloway, uneasy, watched Dutton's behavior and felt the first pangs of moral conflict. Grace approached table 6, serving the main course with practiced elegance. Grilled fillet and roasted vegetables, plated with precision, moved seamlessly from tray to table, while Dutton closed in, accusing her of theft. Despite the baseless claim, she complied with the search, emptying her pockets as the room observed silently. Her mother's bracelet was pinched under the cold metal of the handcuffs, yet her composure remained intact. Diane Prescott, an influential donor, finally broke the collective silence, acknowledging the injustice of the situation. Officer Calloway stepped back from Dutton and secretly called for assistance, recognizing the escalation. Outside, a black SUV arrived, signaling the imminent intervention of Commissioner Nathaniel Sullivan. The tension in the service hallway thickened. Grace's calm, upright stance contrasted sharply with the injustice she endured. She did not cry, did not plead, did not falter. Every guest, every officer, every moment emphasized the stark imbalance of power. In these moments, Grace's resolve became the focal point, her dignity unwavering despite the humiliation and threat. She was about to witness her father's decisive intervention, a turning point that would assert justice, reveal courage, and honor her strength in the face of systemic oppression. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the course of the evening and assert the power of moral integrity over entrenched authority. The tension in the Meridian Grand Hotel service hallway escalated as Grace stood silently, her hands cuffed behind her back. The fluorescent lights highlighted the subtle red marks on her wrists where the cold metal pressed against her mother's gold bracelet. She maintained perfect posture, chin high, eyes clear and unwavering. Dutton, his authority challenged, fumbled with the handcuff key, flustered as the crowd of staff and donors watched. Officer Calloway's phone call had summoned Commissioner Nathaniel Sullivan, who approached with a calm, commanding presence that immediately altered the dynamics. Grace's father, a towering figure of law and moral authority, assessed the situation with quiet intensity. Dutton stammered explanations, but they faltered under the commissioner's steady gaze. The injustice of the handcuffing, the targeting of Grace for no legitimate reason, became painfully clear to everyone observing. The donors and staff, previously passive, now absorbed the weight of the moment. Diane Prescott's earlier remark resonated through the hallway. Someone was finally acknowledging the wrongdoing. Commissioner Sullivan stepped closer, bridging the physical and moral distance between Grace and the corrupt authority that had sought to intimidate her. Grace, unwavering, met her father's eyes with a mixture of pride and relief, a silent acknowledgement of the protection and validation she had earned. The hallway transformed into a courtroom of truth, where the misuse of power was laid bare. Dutton's authority, once unquestioned, collapsed under scrutiny, his hand hovering uselessly over his badge. Grace's composure and dignity shone as an emblem of resilience, illustrating the power of steadfast integrity against arbitrary power. The room's energy shifted from tension to awe, marking the moment where moral courage and familial support intersected to confront systemic injustice, setting the stage for accountability and reform that would ripple beyond this single event. Commissioner Nathaniel Sullivan's presence transformed the hallway. Grace, still standing tall, released a controlled exhale as her father assessed the situation. Dutton's face flushed crimson, each attempted word faltering under Sullivan's unwavering gaze. The crowd of onlookers, staff and donors alike, collectively recognized the gravity of the injustice. Phones were raised, recording the unfolding confrontation, capturing evidence of the misuse of authority. Dutton's hand hovered uselessly over his badge. The symbol of power that had justified harassment now rendered impotent. Grace's composure became the focal point, a testament to dignity in the face of oppression. Sullivan's calm command, cut through the tension. He demanded explanations, documentation, evidence, and when none were produced, he asserted accountability. Officer Calloway, standing apart, felt both relief and moral vindication. The room's energy shifted, a collective recognition that systemic abuse had been challenged. Grace's steadfastness, the silent courage she embodied, underscored the contrast between authority misused and integrity maintained. In that moment, the hallway became both courtroom and stage, a demonstration of the power of truth, resilience, and the presence of moral authority. Dutton's errors were exposed, and the significance of family, conscience, and ethical responsibility resonated, setting the course for immediate reform and a long-term reckoning within the force. Grace's eyes met her father's, conveying gratitude and acknowledgement. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The moment was a quiet victory of courage and justice, signaling that the evening would become a benchmark for accountability, reform, and the enduring power of principled action. Captain Vince Dutton's authority unraveled as Commissioner Sullivan held him accountable. The hallway, once a site of intimidation, became a place of justice. Dutton, forced to surrender his badge and weapon, realized the weight of his actions and the power of procedural misconduct. Grace remained composed, her posture unwavering, her mother's bracelet a subtle emblem of legacy and resilience. Officer Calloway, having followed his conscience, witnessed the consequences of failing to act promptly and the courage it took to intervene. The donor crowd, previously silent, absorbed the lesson. Power misused would no longer be ignored. Sullivan's words echoed beyond the hallway, emphasizing the responsibility inherent in every badge and the necessity of integrity, oversight, and accountability. Grace's quiet strength served as a stark reminder that authority must be balanced by morality. The raw exposure of wrongdoing, broadcasted through onlookers' phones, transformed the event from a gala into a moment of reckoning. Dutton's past complaints, previously buried, resurfaced, revealing a pattern of abuse and bias. Meanwhile, Grace's unflinching composure became the symbol of endurance, turning humiliation into empowerment. The scene highlighted a stark contrast, those who wield authority without conscience versus those who maintain dignity under scrutiny. The ripple effect was immediate, setting the stage for reforms, ensuring systemic failures would be addressed, and illustrating that courage and justice can prevail even in the most intimidating circumstances. In the aftermath, Grace Sullivan's dignity remained intact. The ballroom emptied, the echoes of her father's authority still reverberating through the hall. Her mother's bracelet rested gently against her wrist, no longer pinched, a symbol of endurance and familial support. Grace opened her constitutional law textbook, trying to refocus, but her mind lingered on the confrontation. The lesson extended beyond the gala: resilience in the face of systemic injustice, the importance of standing firm, and the power of accountability. Officer Calloway, having witnessed the events unfold, chose to act on conscience over hierarchy, requesting reassignment to community affairs where oversight and moral integrity were paramount. The ripple effects were immediate. Councilwoman Patricia Moore introduced Resolution 4412, mandating bias training, body cameras for private events, and independent review of detentions. Grace's ordeal highlighted broader issues of racial profiling and misuse of authority, setting a precedent for reform. Dutton faced legal consequences, pledging participation in bias training, becoming a cautionary example. The gala became a symbol of reckoning, a stark illustration that power unchecked can harm, but accountability, integrity, and courage can correct systemic wrongs. Grace's composure and measured response turned personal humiliation into public lesson, proving that strength under pressure can inspire immediate reform and lasting change. The evening, marked by fear, injustice, and ultimately resolution, was a testament to moral courage and the power of standing resolute when confronted by authority misused. By morning, the consequences of the gala had begun to unfold. Captain Dutton's misdeeds were officially documented: unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, and fabricating a theft report. His prior complaints involving civilians of color were reopened, revealing a consistent pattern of misconduct. Grace Sullivan, now a symbol of resilience, had inadvertently catalyzed accountability and reform. Officer Calloway's conscience-driven choices set a new standard for ethical action, influencing the DC Metropolitan Police Department's approach to private events. Councilwoman Moore's resolution passed unanimously, mandating systemic changes to prevent future abuses. Grace's dignity, preserved under pressure, became a lesson not only for those present, but for the broader community. The gala, once a display of wealth and influence, transformed into a pivotal moment of public accountability. Dutton, stripped of authority, faced both legal and professional repercussions, illustrating that even entrenched power can be challenged. Grace's mother's bracelet, resting lightly against her wrist, served as a quiet emblem of perseverance and familial support. The events of the night highlighted the stark contrast between integrity and power misused, showing how courage and composure in the face of injustice can inspire widespread change. This was not merely a personal victory for Grace, but a turning point for systemic reform and moral responsibility in positions of authority. The ripple effects were immediate and profound, setting the stage for her future as a civil rights attorney and a champion of justice. 6 months after the gala, Grace Sullivan walked across the stage in a black gown, heels her mother would have despised, accepting her law degree from Georgetown. She had passed the bar on her first attempt, ranking in the top 12% of her class. The gold bracelet, a constant emblem of her mother's love and guidance, caught the light as she moved. The lessons of the gala, resilience under scrutiny and unwavering dignity, had shaped her path. That morning, she received her first case assignment at Holloway & Grant, a civil rights law firm specializing in police accountability. The file was familiar: a black teenager detained at a mall for merely appearing suspicious, with no charges, no evidence, no incident report, just assumptions and handcuffs. Grace read the details, understanding them intimately, having lived the experience herself. She closed the file, then reopened it, determined to act, to prevent another person from enduring what she had. Every step in her journey, from catering hallways to courtrooms, had prepared her to turn personal trials into public advocacy, proving that standing firm and believing in justice could shape systemic change. Her eyes reflected both resolve and empathy, knowing she now wielded knowledge and authority to create tangible impact, championing those whose voices were too often silenced. Officer Trent Calloway stood before the D.C. City Council in March, detailing the events of the gala in clinical, precise terms. Cameras lined the chamber walls as Councilwoman Patricia Moore presided over the session. Calloway described Captain Dutton's instructions to monitor Grace Sullivan, the psychological pressure of rank, and the silence that had allowed injustice to unfold. His testimony highlighted the moment moral courage overcame obedience, speaking up at the first sign of wrongdoing before the handcuffs were applied. The council absorbed the details of systemic failure and personal responsibility, noting the immediate reforms that followed. Resolution 4012 passed unanimously, requiring body cameras for private events, mandatory bias training, and independent reviews of any detention. Calloway received a commendation for moral courage, the first of its kind in D.C., though he humbly kept it in his desk drawer. Understanding the real reward lay in ethical action and systemic change. Grace's personal experience became a blueprint for advocacy, translating her ordeal into legal and procedural improvements. The hearing underscored the importance of conscience over hierarchy, demonstrating how individual courage can catalyze widespread institutional reform. The impact of the gala and its aftermath extended far beyond the ballroom, setting a precedent for accountability, justice, and the ethical responsibility of officers to protect, not intimidate, the public they serve. Captain Vince Dutton faced legal consequences for his actions at the gala. He pleaded no contest to 2 felony charges and agreed to participate in a national law enforcement bias training program as a case study. In a conference room in Arlington, Virginia, he sat among 46 active duty officers while Councilwoman Moore's unedited video footage played. He watched himself unjustly target Grace Sullivan, scrutinize her pockets, and place handcuffs on her despite her innocence. The session exposed the depth of his misconduct, and for the first time in 24 years, he had no defense, no justification. Grace's resilience and composure under duress became a teaching moment, illustrating the human cost of systemic bias and abuse of authority. Dutton listened silently as the facilitator outlined the moral and procedural failures, understanding that reputation, authority, and the illusion of power can crumble when confronted with ethical truth. The officers in attendance absorbed the lesson, recognizing the importance of conscience, fairness, and accountability in every action. Grace's journey, from Gala humiliation to professional authority, became both a personal victory and a model for broader institutional reform. Grace Sullivan's experience became the foundation of her professional mission. At Holloway and Grant, she handled her first case file immediately. A black teenager detained at a shopping mall with no charges or evidence, a direct reflection of the biases she had endured. Grace called the boy's mother, offering reassurance and legal guidance, demonstrating empathy coupled with legal expertise. Her early exposure to systemic injustice shaped her approach, turning personal trials into actionable advocacy. Officer Calloway's testimony and the passage of Resolution 4412 ensured that her experience informed policy and training reforms, reinforcing the principle that ethical courage can transform institutions. Grace's resilience, intellect, and moral clarity allowed her to navigate the legal system strategically, making tangible changes to protect the rights of those vulnerable to profiling and arbitrary authority. Her journey illustrated how lived experience, when combined with education and determination, can catalyze meaningful societal reform. Officer Trent Calloway's testimony before the D.C. City Council became a defining moment for law enforcement accountability. He described in detail the events of the Gala, emphasizing the pressure of rank and the critical importance of speaking up when authority is misused. His account underscored that silence in the face of injustice perpetuates harm, and that ethical courage can catalyze systemic change. Council members listened intently as he highlighted the contrast between obedience to hierarchy and adherence to conscience. Reinforcing the rationale behind Resolution 4412, the Council's unanimous passage of the reform measures, mandatory bias training, body cameras for officers at private events, and independent review processes, demonstrated that individual actions can influence policy. Calloway's humble reflection, placing his commendation in a desk drawer, symbolized the intrinsic reward of ethical integrity. The combination of Grace Sullivan's lived experience and Calloway's moral courage sent a clear message. Accountability, justice, and reform are achievable when principled individuals act decisively, setting a precedent for future officers and community members alike. Captain Vince Dutton participated in his first bias training session, reviewing the unedited footage from the Gala. The video documented every moment: his targeting of Grace Sullivan, the unnecessary search, the handcuffs applied without cause, and the reactions of the witnesses. The facilitator emphasized the human and systemic consequences of bias, and Dutton absorbed the reality of his actions silently. For the first time, he confronted the impact of misuse of authority and implicit bias. Grace's composure and integrity were central to the session, serving as a real-world case study on ethical courage and systemic reform. The other officers observed the chain of events and the contrast between power misused and dignity maintained. The session was a turning point, demonstrating that individual accountability is essential to institutional change. Dutton had no defense. The lesson was undeniable. Meanwhile, Grace continued her work at Holloway and Grant, using her experience to inform her advocacy and guide her legal practice, ensuring that systemic failures were addressed and that the vulnerable had representation and protection. Her personal journey now extended into systemic influence, turning adversity into transformative impact. Grace Sullivan's journey reached a reflective peak 6 months after the Gala. She had graduated from Georgetown Law, passed the bar on her first attempt, and started her career at Holloway and Grant, specializing in civil rights and police accountability. Every case she handled reminded her of the Gala, the unseen injustices, the misuse of authority, and the courage required to confront them. Officer Calloway's testimony before the D.C. City Council reinforced the reforms she had inspired, demonstrating that ethical courage could reshape systems. Captain Dutton had faced legal consequences and bias training, his career permanently altered. Grace's mother's bracelet remained a symbol of perseverance and resilience, catching the light as she prepared for another day in court. She understood that justice was not an abstract principle, but an active choice, requiring vigilance, advocacy, and the willingness to challenge entrenched power. Her experience became a blueprint for empowerment, transforming personal humiliation into systemic impact. Grace's reflection was profound. Every action mattered, every voice counted, and remaining silent perpetuates harm. The story concluded with a call to action: share this story. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell me, have you ever been judged before you were given a chance to speak? Your story matters. Tell it. Grace had chosen her direction long ago, building, standing, and believing in a better system. Not because it was perfect, but because people like her ensured it could improve, one action at a time.